Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where the veil between the known and the unknown is lifted one story at a time. I welcome you and all our listeners, including first time chat participants. I hope you find tonight's subject and reports interesting. So, we're going to talk about strange highways tonight. Long stretches of highway have always carried a strange allure. Includes freedom, isolation, and sometimes something far more unsettling, from phantom hitchhikers that vanish without a trace to sudden lost hours and roads that seem to change beneath our tires. Countless drivers have reported bizarre encounters that defy explanation. But tonight, we'll explore the chilling mysteries of strange road trips and ask what really waits for us in the dark beyond the headlights. But before I proceed, please consider supporting the channel by clicking the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our content. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. And you can also use the PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links in the description. I thank you for your support and consideration. Now, your comments are always welcome. Please let me or the moderators know which accounts you found interesting in the presentation, or share any suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to thank everyone associated with the channel. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. So this first account, hello, Lon. On the night of November 10th, 2014, around 9:30 p.m., I was driving home on I-20 heading west. I had been in Jacksonville, Mississippi, visiting relatives, and was making my way back to Shreveport, Louisiana. I take this trip frequently, but that night I encountered something that I couldn't explain. Now, as I approached Monroe, Louisiana, near the turnoff to Garrett Road, I noticed something on the connecting road between the eastbound and westbound lanes. Other drivers noticed it too, as their brake lights lit up. Now, as I slowed down and approached, I could see a small figure running in circles with its arms extended, as if imitating an airplane. It was dark, so I couldn't distinguish any features. By this time, many vehicles had nearly come to a stop, and I pulled off onto the shoulder. I was concerned that it might be a child, so I called 911 and was informed that others had made similar calls. I got out of the car and saw that a police cruiser was approaching the figure in the eastbound lane. I stood at the back of my car and watched as the officer pulled into the connecting road. Now, at that point, the small figure was running away on the grassy median heading west in my direction. I still couldn't make out any features, but I could see that it wasn't a child. It was dressed in what appeared to be a long, dark colored cloak, stood about 3 foot tall, and was making horrifying squealing sounds reminiscent of a scared pig. As it continued to run west and past me, another police cruiser in the westbound lane illuminated the figure with a spotlight. Suddenly, a brilliant yellow light flashed from above and the small figure. It was blinding and lasted less than a second. I was in shock. My knees went weak, and I felt the need to get back in my car and sit down. When I looked out my window, I didn't see any spotlights or vehicle lights. It was completely dark. Even the highway lights were off. Now, I attempted to start my car, but it wouldn't turn over. I sat there dumbfounded, wondering what had just happened. After about 20 to 30 seconds, my car finally started, and all the highway and traffic lights came back on. I didn't see the small figure after that. I pulled back onto the turnoff and eventually found my way back to I-20, heading west towards home. I still had no idea what happened that night. I believe there was a loss of time since my clock showed 10:13 p.m. Now, for several weeks, I hoped to see news about this incident, but I never found anything. I contacted the police in the Monroe area, and they reported no record of any calls related to the event. That was quite unusual. I know this incident occurred. Many witnesses also lost power in their vehicles. Do you have any suggestions for whom I should contact? Thank you. Now, while the witness did prefer to remain anonymous at that time, he seemed somewhat intimidated by the lack of reports regarding the incident. Now, I managed to reach him by telephone, and we discussed other avenues for obtaining information, including the local media. Now, we talked again later, and he informed me that the press had not received any reports as well. I made some inquiries, but found no leads. Now, I did check on the MUFON CMS in New Fork. And they didn't really have any explanation. They didn't get a thing. So I don't really don't know. Was it non-terrestrial encounters, some type terrestrial? I have no idea. But I'll leave it to you all to consider it, and maybe you have an answer as to what happened. And I want to thank Jean Lujan for their donations. Very much appreciated. So this next account, the witness states, "Hello, sir. I have never seen any humanoids or whatever they're called, but I have heard stories about sightings. About 12 years ago, my cousins were driving back home from a casino in Oklahoma. They weren't drinking or anything like that, but it was late at night. And as they approached the intersection of Oklahoma Highway 183 at the Texas border to get onto Highway 287 towards Vernon, Texas, they noticed an animal-like creature crouched in the ditch. Now, as they got closer, the creature stood up on two legs, looked at them, and then ran off into the brush. They described it as a white, hairless, human-like being. My cousin would get goosebumps and tear up whenever he recounted the story, or she recounted the story. Now, my mother-in-law had a similar story about 20 years ago. She was driving a charter bus for elderly passengers, bringing them back from a trip to New Mexico. There were about 6 elderly ladies with her. While driving on the back road just at dawn, one of the ladies pointed out, "What is that?" As they drew closer, thinking it was a deer or coyote, they saw it stand up on two legs like a human and run off into the woods. My mother-in-law and the 2 other ladies witnessed it. She mentioned that she didn't adhere to the speed limit for the rest of their journey home. The incident occurred in a very rural area near Daugherty, Texas. So this next account, the witness states, in 2008, my family lived in rural Nevada where my dad worked as a hunting guide. He convinced my mom to move up to Alaska, so we made the 3,000-mile drive along the Alaskan highway through Canada, spending a significant amount of time enjoying the Yukon Territory. We had three large trucks, all pulling trailers loaded with our belongings. Now, if you've ever driven the Alaskan highway, you know there are many different large rest areas. My dad built an enclosure on the tailgate of his truck, creating a room with windows for my brothers and me to hang out in, allowing us to avoid being strapped into our seats for the entire drive. Now, as an avid hunter, my dad faced challenges when bringing his collection of over 30 guns through customs into Canada. Now, once we were cleared, we kept a 500 caliber revolver for bear protection in the cab with him. Now, one night, very late and incredibly dark, we stopped at a rest area somewhere near Laird Hot Springs, British Columbia, about 50 miles away. We were all asleep when suddenly we heard several gunshots coming from the cab of the truck. My mom was hysterical, and the driver of the other vehicle was outside with a shotgun. My dad went to him to the edge of the cleared rest area where I could only see a dense wall of trees. When they parked, the lights illuminated the forest. My dad was looking straight ahead when he suddenly noticed an immensely large figure standing perfectly still at the edge of the tree line. Now he hadn't seen it until it stepped closer to our truck. He recalls its eyes being incredibly vivid green, glowing in the reflection of the headlights. My mom and the other driver's girlfriend were in the porta potty just to the left of the truck. So my dad immediately pulled out the revolver and started shooting, terrified that the figure was moving toward the porta potties. After the first shot was fired, he said he had never seen an animal react so quickly and effortlessly. I think about that night often, and I feel it was important to share this story. Now, for some additional context, it wasn't a bear. By then, my dad had been a seasonal hunting guide for several years and had successfully hunted black bear, brown bear, and grizzly bear. Since that night, we've driven that road several times back and forth between Canada and Nevada, and thankfully, we never had another encounter. Still, it gives me chills to think about it. Now, after a few questions, the witness stated the following. My dad is a guide, and you can't just trek into the Alaskan wilderness hoping to hunt big game. I want to thank Real Truth for their donation. Thank you. Many inexperienced hunters face serious dangers, and unfortunately, some people even die this way. Individuals who can afford this style of hunting often lack experience with the harsh realities of the Alaskan wilderness, and many have never taken down big game before. Now, he also said that most trips involve a crew of 4 to 5 people flying out in a small float boat to a remote northern parts of Alaska for at least a month. This means packing 30 or more guns for different scenarios and options. Now, my father also collected some black powder weapons, but he only takes when it's necessary for protection and what is needed to hunt specific animals. Now, if you're not familiar with the Alaska bush, it's hard to grasp the level of danger involved in these trips. People frequently die or go missing in the wilderness. He said, I went on a trip with him when I was 12, and it was the worst trip of my life. I carried a 45 sidearm and a 12-gauge shotgun loaded with slugs, but I wasn't the one hunting. The guns were for protection. The entire time I felt frightened. We were just feet away from an enormous bull moose and the largest brown bear I had ever seen. When a shot is fired at a brown bear, it doesn't simply drop or run like other animals. It often reacts with aggression. After the first shot, there's a moment of hesitation to gauge the animal's response. If it starts moving toward you, everyone begins firing. It was terrifying. Just a few months before this trip, I had been trampled by a small mama moose, which heightened my fear of large animals during that trip. So this next account, the witness states, it was a very hot summer night. I was returning from Virginia Beach, and my girlfriend was with me at the time when I arrived in Mississippi. I had left Virginia early that morning in my car. By the time I reached Highway 59 in Mississippi, it was already close to midnight or maybe even 1 a.m. Highway 59 in eastern Mississippi is a lonely stretch of road. You only have the highway with traffic going in both directions, flanked by tall trees on both sides, and very little else. Perhaps there's a rest area or a small gas station every 15 miles, but in between, there's just nothing. So as I drove that night, I was tired from being on the road since the morning in Virginia. My girlfriend was already asleep, and my little boy was in the back seat. Being a night person, I had no problem staying awake. As I continued down the highway, I noticed a man walking on the shoulder. He was walking quite fast and looking down. He was a very tall man, and I thought he was wearing a coat. I wondered, what in the world is he doing out there? Why would he be wearing a coat in this hot Mississippi night? I turned to my girlfriend and said, I saw a man walking all alone. I need to help him. She responded, are you crazy? I replied, no, I'm not going to offer him a ride. I want to give him some money so he can get a room or buy himself a nice hot meal in the next town. Well, I put the car in reverse, making sure I didn't drive past him since I was already about 2,000 feet ahead. Now, as I backed up, he was closer to the edge of the woods on the shoulder of the highway. I stopped the car and he stopped as well. He looked at me and I struggled to adjust my eyes in the darkness. I said, sir, I would like to offer you some money so you can rent a room in the next town. Then he made a loud screeching sound that was so intense it still resonates in my ears today. And suddenly he ran into the woods. I was horrified. I quickly got back in my car and said, honey, but I couldn't say anything more. I put the car in first gear and sped away at 85 miles an hour. My girlfriend asked, what happened? What happened, honey? What did he do to you? I replied, it wasn't a man. It was a Sasquatch. I just had an encounter with Bigfoot. Later, I learned there had been stories dating back to the 1700s and the 1800s about the Mississippi monkey. Now, I've heard the Mississippi monkey before. I don't know if that was related or not, but it kind of does add up because it's said to be very thin. So maybe that's what he saw. I have no idea. Now, the following account was forwarded to me just yesterday by my Adams County, Pennsylvania neighbor, Alan Lowen, who I had the pleasure of meeting at a Bigfoot group meeting several years ago in Biglerville, Pennsylvania, which is situated along the eastern boundary of Michaud State Forest. Now, in the account, he says it's a true story and one that taught me there is something more potent than magic. It's wonder. In the summer of 1973, I worked at a shoe factory in Carlisle, Pennsylvania to help cover the cost of my education. The commute from my home to work took about 25 minutes each way, passing through some of the Pennsylvania's most beautiful farmland and second growth woods. Now, due to the layout of the roads, there was exactly 5 different routes to and from the factory, each taking the same amount of time. I would alternate between these routes daily to enjoy the scenery. So one day while driving home, I took a different road. And as I went, I relished the view of the wildlife and the lush greenery of rural Pennsylvania in the summer. As the road twisted through the woods, I spotted a grass-covered lane leading off to my right. When I looked down at its length, I saw something I'd never been able to explain. I can still vividly recall what I saw as the memory is firmly imprinted in my mind. The view was of a shadowed lane leading into the bright sunlit expanse of a Pennsylvania meadow. The interplay of light and mist made it seem like the scene painted by John William Waterhouse or Frederick Edwin Church. So how did I describe the moment? It was a Pennsylvania meadow untouched by original sin. It was the vision of Eden and its first purity, or Arcadia, or the Elysian fields made corporeal. Walking into that field felt like stepping through a portal into the realm of fairies from which no mortal could ever return. In an instant, it vanished behind me and I drove away, leaving me breathless with the memory. Now, here's where it gets strange. So profoundly affected by the vision, I searched for the lane the next day after work. I took the road I thought I had traveled the day before, but I found no grass covered lane. No problem, I thought. I must have just taken the wrong road. For the rest of the summer, I traveled those 5 routes repeatedly looking for that lane and sunlit meadow, but I never found them again. Now, this next witness states my family is from Utah, and when I was a kid, we took a road trip in a rented camper to California. There is a specific area near Nephi, Utah, that is known for a massacre that occurred in the mid 1800s. All I know is that a mass murder happened there and all the bodies were buried in the desert off of I 15. It's an eerie part of Utah, especially along the main highway. Now, on our way back, I was sitting in the front seat next to my mother while my dad was driving. As we passed through Nephi, near the site of the massacre, my dad suddenly got a bit panicked. He told my mom to lean over and look into the side view mirror, and I did as well. What we saw was a back door of a trailer flapping open and shut in the wrong direction. To visualize it, the back door was a single door that opened from the right side with the hinges on the left. It was swinging back and forth off the hinges in a completely impossible way. Freaked out, my dad pulled the trailer over, thinking something was broken. We got out on the side of I 15. It was late evening, the sun was starting to set, and there were no cars around. We checked the door and found that the hinges were latched in perfect condition, and the door was secured. Now, we were completely baffled. We knew what we saw, but it made zero sense compared to what we were looking at now. There were no signs that the door had been moving in that direction, and no defects were visible. We stood there for about 15 minutes, rechecking everything to ensure accuracy. Then suddenly, a green Oldsmobile car pulled up about 100 yards behind us. Now, at first, we thought someone might be stopping to see if we needed help. 3 large Polynesian men got out of the car. They stood there staring at us for a few seconds before walking to the back of their vehicle, seemingly checking on something wrong with it. I was overwhelmed by a terrifying feeling. I could sense it. Something was off. I looked at my parents and saw the same look of fear in both of their faces. My mom whispered for me to get back in the trailer. I ran inside so fast, I wasn't going to wait for her to tell me twice. I watched from the window as my dad hurried to secure everything back up. The 3 men noticed my parents trying to get back in the trailer and started marching quickly towards us. My parents dashed into the trailer, started up, and my dad gunned it out of there before the men could reach us. The whole experience was incredibly creepy, and I often wonder what might have happened if we had managed to escape out of there. Kind of left that hanging. So this next witness states, in the summer of 1975, my girlfriend and I embarked on a spontaneous road trip through the back roads of the Midwest that lasted about 2 weeks. So one evening in rural Kansas, after crossing a cement bridge over a river, we pulled into a farmer's access road and parked at the edge of the field alongside the bend of a river with the car facing east. Not long after we stopped, we noticed a strange light suddenly approaching our location at an incredible speed. Suddenly, a dark object, rectangular in shape, hovered above the trees, with one red and one green running light positioned together on the lower part of the craft at its center. We stared in amazement and couldn't take our eyes off the object. After about 5 minutes, we observed that the craft had shifted to the right, moving very slowly to the other side of the river. Now, after about 5 minutes, I decided it was time to leave the area. Now, as we turned onto the county road and subsequently onto the cement bridge, we saw that the craft had returned to its original position, hovering above us and slightly behind the bridge. I stopped again and got out to take a closer look. The object appeared to be about 20 to 25 feet wide, and I noticed a large rectangular glass window or something that was looking like glass running across the middle third of its front. Inside to the left stood two beings looking down at us. I could see them only from the waist up, but they seemed to be about 4 foot tall with abnormally large heads and large black eyes. Their eyes appeared devoid of emotion, and their skin was pure white, resembling the texture of an albino salamander. Their eyes were oriented almost north south in relation to their heads. The craft remained silent the entire time. Now, after about a minute of making eye contact with the humanoids, I returned to the car and quickly drove away from the area. We could still see the craft hovering where we had left it. Now, eventually, my girlfriend and I got married, and we still live very close to the location where we witnessed the craft. Occasionally, we both feel an urge to return to that spot and sit together and talk about our shared experience, hoping that the beings might stop by again. This next witness states, I was driving across the country from Washington to New York in a U-Haul with my ex-boyfriend and our 2-year-old son, all squeezed into the front bench seat. While we were on I-90 in Montana, we could see a lightning storm brewing in the mountains ahead of us, excuse me. By the time we reached the mountains, it was pitch black and the storm had passed. We drove slowly around 35 miles an hour because it was so dark. And suddenly we encountered a fallen tree that had blocked the road. It looked like it had been hit by something, and we barely managed to avoid crashing into it ourselves. Out of nowhere, we found ourselves surrounded by wrecked cars and flashing lights. There was a semi truck with its hazard lights on, along with several other vehicles that had collided, and bodies were lying on the road. It was as if it had all appeared out of thin air. There were no hills, dips, curves, or fog to obscure our view, yet we suddenly found ourselves in the middle of a 10-car pileup, complete with hazards and flares. Now, my boyfriend and I were both wide awake and experienced this bizarre situation together. It felt like we had driven through a portal into another dimension, or that the vehicles and people had somehow dropped into our reality. The individuals in the road were unharmed, who were unharmed and waved at us, urging us not to stop. And we felt compelled to keep going, even though I regretted not stopping. So this next account, the witness states that this happened in Gallup, New Mexico on July 4th of 1991. He said it felt like an alien landing party had cut off traffic along Interstate 40. He said it sounds crazy, but it's not as if you've been through what I've been through. My family is from Roswell, New Mexico. My father was born in 1904, and our roots trace back to Norway. They traveled to New Mexico where they worked on the railroads. My grandfather was killed in Las Vegas, New Mexico in 1916, which led my dad to live with his aunt in Roswell. He would never talk about his experiences, and I won't go into detail because it's just too strange. So every summer we would take a long road trip through New Mexico, and every time we neared Gallup or ventured into the high desert of New Mexico, something unsettling would happen. I've grown used to it over the years, and it no longer rattles me. So in 1987, while I was in Tucson, I began seeing strange lights that eventually followed them into the desert, which led to trouble. The police had come and the police had to come and pick me up, which left me with a lot of explaining to do. I've tried to report these incidents, but no one takes me seriously. I feel like they're following me around, and I suspect it's related to my family's history. Whenever I'm near Gallup, New Mexico, I have to be cautious. So in 1991, we were going on a family vacation. There were 4 of us in the car: my husband, me, and our 2 kids, my daughter, who was 14, and my son, who was 12. We left Flagstaff late, trying to reach Albuquerque. As we drove along, we saw lights ahead of us. As we got closer, we realized it was a series of roadblocks with yellow flashing lights. In a pitch black, we saw a road crew, but everyone was facing in the wrong direction. They wore yellow reflective gear with hoods that obscured their faces. They had narrowed one I-40 down to one lane, and then the lane just disappeared. Now, we passed through that dark area, followed by a blinding flash of light, and suddenly we found ourselves back about a mile down the road. I noticed that we kept passing the same hills on our left side, and then my son started screaming in panic. My husband, who's a bit of a space cadet anyway, ended up having to drive us to Gallup. We checked into a local hotel, but it felt strange. So about 2 a.m., we went to grab a burger, and the atmosphere just felt off. People were moving at half speed and acting confused. The waiter set our table incorrectly and handed us the menus upside down. Sometimes you might think people are just being foolish, but these individuals really seem to be out of sorts. I played along because I already sensed something was wrong. My husband was pretty tolerant and patient, but they genuinely didn't seem to know how to behave. So the next day, it only got worse, but we ended up turning the car around and heading back to Phoenix where we lived. So years later, when my son was about 25, he asked me, Mom, did we ever take a trip where we passed the same mountain twice? He remembered those strange experiences, and while we occasionally discussed them, I prefer not to bring them up too much to avoid upsetting him. It's just something we learned to live with. I suspect they took our whole car somewhere and then brought it back, dropping us off a mile before the landing party. Now, after we drove past the same mountain again, the roadblocks were gone, along with the lights and the people in reflective gear. Now, my husband and I sort of laugh whenever we see a road crew. Whoever they are, they're fairly sophisticated. They must have uniforms. I've seen some of them fixing light poles in the middle of the night in Tucson, and as soon as I showed up, they all ran away. I believe this has been going on for generations, even when my dad was young. He served in World War II and had his own close encounters. My husband recalled that a ship landed in his yard when he was a kid living in Reno. I think they know which families they can trust, and then they follow us around. Honestly, I don't think they have any contact with the U.S. government. I don't believe there's a cover. It seems they have no real use for the government. I get the impression that they're just going about their business, and occasionally we catch a glimpse of them. I also believe that many of the frightening things associated with UFOs are simply earthbound antics. I would have loved to report his experience when they happened. So that's the last account. So if you all have any questions or any comments to make, please feel free to make them. Use all caps and post it in the chat, and Kevin will put them up there for me then. Until we get some questions, I just want to tell you on the Fams of Monsters website, if you do want to sign up for the newsletter, which I'm in the process of connecting now, just go ahead and do so. What I'm planning on doing is putting a newsletter out every 2 or 3 weeks. So it'll come right to your email. We'll have different things in there, some stuff that just normally get into the blog. So if you're interested, go to famsofmonsters.com and sign up for it. So I see in the chat, Dag Namit has a comment. South Dakota has a well-traveled highway that has many strange things happening to different people that travel it. Well, honestly, I've heard of a lot of different places with something that's similar to that. In South Dakota, it wouldn't surprise me because of the number of native reservations that are there. In fact, I think there are 6 or 7 of them actually. And I've heard a lot of stories that come out of South Dakota. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Caleb Gates, What roads are the spookiest in the US? I've always wanted to travel on the spooky roads. Well, there's a lot of them. Highway wise, I don't know. I know there are a lot of back roads and such, but as far as highway, I would say some of the strangest accounts that I have received over the years of weird sightings are usually on desert roads. I know back in 1994, I was out in Las Vegas and I drove to LA. Now, I don't know if they're mirages or what they were, but I saw a lot of lights and I saw a lot of weird things along the road. I don't know what they were, but you know, who knows? I think desert roads are probably the spookiest, but maybe there's a reason for that. Uh, MXVT, what are the odds of seeing a dog man north of New Hampshire? I've had a few accounts in Maine, um, and up in Ontario. Uh, Southern Ontario has had a lot of accounts over the years, but that's mostly towards the Niagara area, not up into the area where Eastern Ontario and into Quebec. But I have had some accounts in Maine. Can Squatch, any weird hitchhiker encounters? Yeah, I have, and I did talk about a lot of those in previous episodes. What I may do is just get a whole do a whole show on just hitchhiker encounters or stories about ghostly beings just showing up in cars and such. I've got a few of those. Lumen 101 states, "Do you stream this time every week? I'm new. Thanks, love, and the show." Yeah, I try to. Occasionally, something happens where we got to cancel, but for the most part, I do have a show every Friday night live. Alexis Chastain, do you think Dogman and Bigfoot creatures are somehow related? I think I don't think they're related, but I think a lot of people mistake, each one. I think there are a lot of maybe dogmen that look like Bigfoot and vice versa. I mean, I think there are races of these things, and just like all humans, humans are different. So maybe there are different types of dogmen and Bigfoot. Dagnammit, have you heard of the Tikbalang, the Philippine horse-headed creature? Yeah, I actually did a post about that a while back. I have heard of it. Philippines have all kinds of crazy cryptid beings. I have heard some really strange stories out of the Philippines, but no, I actually posted something about that a while back. But yeah, it is. It's a horse-like being, upright horse-like being. So yeah, but I'm familiar with it. No Q. I used to drive after 1 a.m. from work and it wasn't fun. Do you think it's worse for the particular reason? I don't know. I think if you're out in the middle of the night like that, wherever you are, you're kind of looking more intently. Maybe our eyes play tricks on us and we start seeing things that aren't really there. But who knows? Um, I mean, for the most part, they say that these strange creatures come out at night, and maybe we're kind of in tune to them, and maybe that's what we're looking for. Who knows? Caleb Gates, who's that crow guy in the background? I'm new. Is that a cryptid thing? That is Edgar Allan Poe and the Crow, or the Raven. It's not a crow. It's a raven. Is that's a illustration by Sam Sharon. He does a lot of creepy stuff, but he's a very good artist, and I have collected some of his work. But that's Edgar Allan Poe with The Raven. B Cab. Do you have any reports of strange creatures near Lake Tahoe? Yeah, some Bigfoot sightings. That's pretty much the standard for Lake Tahoe area. Alexis Chaston, would you ever do a show about different light phenomena? Yeah, I could. I had to see if I have enough accounts to do a show, but I'll see what I can do. I'll take a note and see what I can find. Anything else, folks? MXVT, do you think a dogman could gap a Hellcat? I have no idea. I have no idea. Yeah, I think Low Man's trolling us. I saw a few other things in there. We'll just ignore him for now. Okay, well, I want to thank each and all you for watching and chatting. And if you donated, it's genuinely appreciated. Your support's what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. Now, if you have a sighting or encounter report that you would like to be considered for the personal report show or posted on Phantoms and Monsters, feel free to forward to my email at lonstrickler@phantomsandmonsters.com. So until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend and good night.